All right, it is 5 o'clock. We'd like to welcome all of you to our meeting. Today is Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. This is a special council meeting, and we have a couple things that we need to take care of today. So welcome to all of you and all of those who are joining us on YouTube. We decided that we needed a few more things on the agenda, so
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to amend the agenda to add an opening to the meeting, including the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilwoman Worthen.
Second.
okay, it's been moved and seconded that we will amend this agenda to approve the agenda and also to add a pledge by Councilwoman Gina Worthen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment?
Motion to approve with the amended agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda with the amendment as stated. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right.
Should I go ahead? Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have an item of special interest here regarding the interim Cache County attorney. Hello, Gordy, come on in.
You're on time. We're only 3 minutes late. Look at this.
I received a letter of resignation from former Cache County attorney John Luthi, and his resignation was effective as of midnight on October 27th of 2022. And I won't read this whole letter, but I will go down to the last paragraph where it says, I recommend that the council appoint Dane Murray, Chief Prosecutor and Deputy County Attorney, as interim replacement and acting county attorney until the vacancy in the office of Cache County Attorney is filled during the 2024 general election. Dane has my full confidence. He will serve honorably, and he will receive strong support from the remainder of the Cache Attorney's office. So, council, that said, we need to make an approval for that appointment.
I move to accept that suggestion, I should say, that his recommendation.
Okay.
And that we put Dane Murray in as the.
I will second that motion.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we will approve that recommendation from John Luthi and appoint Dane Murray as Chief Prosecutor and Deputy County Attorney as an interim replacement and acting county attorney until the vacancy in the office of Cache County Attorney is filled during the 2024 general election. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. Dane and Jess, if you will please come up front and we'll have a swearing in for the oath of office.
And a speech.
And
5 minutes.
yeah.
All right, man. After me. I state your name,
Dane Murray,
having been appointed
appointed
to the office
to the office
of interim Cache County Attorney,
of interim Cache County Attorney,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
with fidelity.
with fidelity.
Okay, very good. Okay. I didn't say it. That's somebody else. But
I will make
I just want to thank the council. Thank
John for his recommendation. I should say Judge Luthi.
Yeah.
Thank all of my coworkers that are here today. I appreciate you all. Tony back there and Carol and Nate, Stephanie from the administrative team in our office. We have people from the victim advocate's office, legal assistants and attorneys. Mike from the public defender's office, and then most of all my wife, Maddie in the back row, my parents, Mel and Debbie, and then my sister-in-law Abby and my brother-in-law Kate. I just appreciate them being here, and I look forward to this work, and thank you for the confidence in this office. It's a huge responsibility, and I take that extremely seriously. So thank you.
Thank you, Dane. Thank you. All right, this next item on the agenda is the discussion of the 2023 Cache County budget. And, yes. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jess, for attending. All right. Is anybody else warm in here? Yeah. Yeah, can we turn that down a little bit?
That cleared things out, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Let's go ahead and start discussing the budget then. Anyone want to begin?
Well, I've spent 2 sleepless nights trying to work with Cassell. And looking at things, I just jotted down a couple of, 5 items actually.
Okay.
First item is that I'm a little concerned about, well, how shall I? Being out of debt is a good thing most of the time, but using a great deal of our liquidity to retire debt that's extremely low rate is a concern for me, because should we need then that liquidity to fund other projects, to fund other capital projects? The budget currently has 0 budgeted for capital projects. We know that that can't be sustained. There's already been some talk about a need to expand and change the offices for our county administration functions, services in the building next door here. And so if you've got something like that coming up that we're going to be looking at, and we've used up funds to pay off low interest debt, that leaves us in a situation where we would have to take on probably new debt at a higher interest rate. And so that's a concern I have, is that we're maybe, for the sake of saying that we have paid off all of our debt, we're maybe leaving ourselves in a situation where we're going to have to take on more debt at a higher cost. And then I was thinking again too of the situation we were in February of what year was it? 20? Was it 16, where we had the heavy flooding, and we ended up with significant costs.
The bridges that went out.
Bridges that went out and things like that we had to cover. We had to find money to cover those kinds of things, and so I guess I'm proposing that we don't pay off our debt.
So, Carl, would you be opposed to, before you get to the rest of your items that you have concern over, we talk about that one? I mean, we got an elephant to eat here, and we need to do it one bite at a time, and I'd love to talk more about this.
Okay.
Just to tag on to that, I am in full and complete agreement with Carl. And in fact, I think the executive's in full and complete agreement with Carl. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but on his blog in February of this year, he reported that he urged the Council of Governments to take a look at bonding options in order to save money. The council had did that several years before. And in fact, this council has 3 bonds. One of them from 2016 at 1.5 and change that's going to be paid off this year. And that was rollover money from the jail and things of that nature. The second bond is for the event center, and that is at 2.51%. And then the third bond is for the roads facility at 2.5%. Most of this cash we already have on hand. And I agree with Carl that debt is a bad thing. And I also agree with the executive that cash in an inflationary period does lose value if you leave it in your mattress. But we're not leaving it in a mattress. We're investing it in the Public Treasurer's Investment Fund with the state. And the interest rate in that is going up dramatically. In fact, a few years ago, it was up over 5%. It's currently sitting at 2.44%. And with what the Fed's doing, it should be up above that. So basically, if we have that cash on hand to pay off, we can keep it in the investment funds that we have and actually make more than we have to pay in interest.
Yeah.
So leaving that fund will make the county money and give us the options in the event of a natural disaster where we need to do bridges. It would be egregiously irresponsible to get rid of that money today. I mean, as you move into an inflationary period and a recessionary period, you need to have a financial plan. We have that with our capital improvements. We need to prioritize our savings and our cash, which is what Carl's recommending. And we need to ensure proper debt management. And our treasurer, Craig McAllister, has been doing a tremendous job with that.
Yeah, he has.
So I absolutely agree. We should get rid of it. We can talk more about it, but I don't want to beat that horse too much.
Interest rates will be raised tomorrow by the Fed, so that only enhances what the performance on that cash fund will do, and they'll raise it again in December. So I'm in total agreement, not paying off debt when it is that low of interest rate. We're leveraging our money to a positive effect.
And I think the one thing the council can do with that is there are different ways that we could look to do that. And we could leave those funds in the general fund, and we, as a council, can take action to commit those funds so that they can't be spent willy-nilly, so that we can keep them in the PTIF, earning that interest rate. And then, in the event of an emergency, the council can reconvene and uncommit those funds to spend in the event of emergency. But we can commit them so they can't be just spent willy-nilly, and we can continue to earn that rate to pay it off.
Well said, Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
Very well said.
All right.
I'll
Go
just
ahead.
say I agree with that sentiment
That's
as
just,
well. And
yeah.
Everything I've looked at, the economic forecast is kind of problematic. It looks like we already have inflation. We could be headed toward a recession. So I agree with what these gentlemen said wholeheartedly.
And I've had a concern expressed to me that the county would be in rough shape if we were to pay off this debt right now, and then maybe need to get something later at a higher rate of interest.
And the other thing I'd like to say in this meeting is I'm so glad the executive's here. He's indicated that he wants to have a dialogue with the council, and I think we'd all love to hear from him on this issue.
Yes, thank you. I'll just add to that, and thank you, Councilmember Borup, for your questions that you emailed. That's always helpful to have those discussions and provide information beforehand. One of the questions you asked was about our limits of how much the state says we should, the minimum for how much we should have in our fund balance and the maximum. And that's between 5 and 25% of our total revenues, and that would be between 2.8 million and 31.5 million is what those limits would be that the state would recommend we have in our fund balance. So at the end of this year, we'll actually be at the very top of that. That 31.5 million will be at 31.1 million. So just right under the top end of that. If we were to pay off the debt, then that would bring our fund balance down to just under 20 million. So about 20 million that would be left over in fund balance. And so if the debt were paid off, we'd still have 20 million well within the limits and about 10 times as much as the minimum that we would need to have. So, but nevertheless, I do really appreciate the dialogue and the discussion because this is, the budget is just a proposal. It's a proposal from the executive branch, and the executive branch can give their input and change it however you like. So if it's your wisdom that we don't pay off the debt, then I would support that.
And David, how did we get to $31 million in that fund?
I think Cameron could probably explain that better.
I'd prefer to hear from you. It's your budget. How did we get to $31 million in that fund?
I asked Cameron how much would be left at the end of the year, and that's the number he gave me. I don't.
20 million of that was from ARPA and CARES.
Well, how did we get there?
How did we get there? It
Yeah.
was from ARPA and CARES.
Yeah.
And so I believe with that money, I've been on the record from ARPA and CARES long before you were at the county, that that's money we should be very careful with, because we as a society are now living with what the federal government's done, and you don't double down on dumb. The federal government sent us that money, we shouldn't double down and be done with it. So if you take that money out, Cache County itself and the way that this council and prior executives have managed this county has been tremendous. And they were able to build a rainy day fund of about $10 million. So I think as we look at our budget today and going forward, we should not give ourselves credit for the federal government sending us over $20 million.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. So, yes, 10 million of that was ARPA money that we, the federal guidelines allowed us to essentially transition into our general fund. Yeah, 10 million of that is ARPA money, which I totally agree with you that the federal government should not have done that. That money doesn't even exist. They just invented it and gave it to every city and county and state across the nation and indebted our children for generations to come. I hate it that they've done that, but we have the money now, and so it's now in the council's hands how we spend that money, or if we just hang on to it.
Well, we all know that that money that's from ARPA is pigeonholed to exactly where it can go, so nowhere down the line would the county or the council be able to apply that for disasters or anything else. So we need to be cautious about that, because that's, in my view, that really should be set aside and not even counted in the general fund, because we can't really use it for the general fund. It is so pigeonholed.
There are two pieces. So with the money that we got, there was 10 million that they essentially allowed us to supplant into our general fund, and it has no restrictions on it. So that money had no restrictions on it. And then there was about 5 million, or we have about 5 million left, that's the restricted money that we can only use according to the guidelines that they give us.
And while we're talking about buildings, I think I do want to bring this up. This is the 2021 through 2023 capital improvement plan. None of the buildings, I think it's been said that this council doesn't want to do buildings, and that's not the case. This council doesn't want to do buildings that we haven't planned for and are just fly-by-night buildings. I'd like to understand why any of the buildings that were in this capital improvement plan weren't addressed in the budget. David?
I apologize if I misinterpreted the direction that I heard from you, Councilmember Bork, but I thought it was your intent or that it was your desire to not build new buildings at this time. So that's the reason why I didn't consider any new buildings.
That we had that capital improvement plan that was in place that we've been executing on. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
If it is the council's direction that you'd like us to make some proposals about some of the projects in the capital improvement plan, to use some of these funds for that, we would be happy to make those proposals.
Great.
Okay. Carl, would you like to continue on?
Thank you for letting me tag along on that, Carl.
Well, I received a call from Roger Jones, who's the director of Bragg, and they have a request, and I think you got the same letter I did, or email, that there's a need for veterans on aging part of Bragg to have some additional funding to be able to allow them to continue to provide the services necessary to veterans. Box Elder County just yesterday committed $200,000 of ARPA funds to that, and I think it would probably be beneficial if we were to do the same, and that would allow them to continue to provide those services for up into 2025. That would be enough for them to take care of that. And so I'm not exactly sure what, I mean, it's ARPA money, and I think, it's tagged, it's limited on what its use can be, but this would qualify.
Yeah, I did get a request from Bragg for that $100,000 for veterans, and we're currently just doing a little bit more research to find out exactly what the program is, if it would qualify, but I would love to see that in our budget if we can find a good spot for it and if it qualifies for those funds.
Again, it's ARPA funds, and so they are limited in their use for general purposes, but this is a use that they can be applied to.
I totally agree with you, Carl. I think we need to take better care of our veterans and allow some money for that.
We have a veterans center on Main Street in North Logan, and that, in order for them to continue, they're going to need to have.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And Carl, what kind of, did Roger talk about the services that the Bragg would be doing? Was there any specific services for that?
I've got quite a lengthy.
Okay. Because it looks like that in some of our different accounts, either, mental health or welfare services, I'm looking at the 2023 budget, and there appears to be, especially in the, let me make sure I'm accounting for the right fund, but there's some blank line items that we could fill that with.
Yeah. It addresses homelessness, it addresses mental health issues for veterans, and it addresses employment training, and those are three areas.
Perfect.
And the other item I had was we approved in our Bragg meeting to move to a regional economic development plan rather than just local county. And we, it was voted on and agreed for Sean to fill that role as regional. So he would be working with Box Elder County, Cache County, and Rich County in that role. For him to do that, of course, all three counties are going to have to contribute funding to that office in Bragg. And we already have it budgeted for our county here directly. And so I would request that we change and I don't know, Cameron will have to describe how we do that, but how we move the funding we have budgeted for doing it for a local economic development director to sending it over to Bragg in order to fund him. And I mean, that's...
Carl, would that amount go down from our portion because it would go up?
Yeah, because...
Respectively from the others?
I think we figured it would be about, Dave, was about 30% would come from Box Elder County, 70% from us, and just 4 or 5% from Rich, something like that.
So right now, we've got in the budget, what, $80,000 to match the funding from the state?
So the way that would work in the
Yeah, how will
budget.
that work?
And I fully support Carl in this. The 2023 budget presented by the executive has $292,200 in the economic development bucket. Our portion for Bragg would be roughly $148,000 and change. Now, that's not, we can't take it down dollar for dollar because there's a few other things in the detail, but we're going to save, I would estimate $100,000 by making this move.
I thought we had a $200,000
And
grant.
There is a grant that funds
So-
that portion of the line item, but that's why we had that special session to vote on that grant with the language so that we can then use that grant money to,
But we
Send some
wouldn't
to
be paying 148, would we? We'd be paying 70% of 80,000? Because that's
no,
our match?
148, that's our match for
292.
as much as
Okay,
Bragg's.
I
Whatever
must
the
have
budget
misunderstood.
Amount was for Bragg.
Okay.
So our
And then
share is
along with that,
148.
I don't know how to do this. This may not be the forum to bring that up in, but Sean is using a county vehicle right now. And we would probably need to do an asset transfer and move that vehicle over to support his work at Bragg.
I'd be
Again,
fully
I don't
supportive.
know the procedures for doing all of that, but I just bring it up as.
I think I'd be fully supportive of that.
My recommendation would be that we figure this all out in writing with Bragg as far as the MOU.
We have to do that.
Yeah, get the MOU figured out. We could put information about vehicles and whatever other equipment supplies in the MOU, and then we could bring that back. There's
Can I
enough
ask you a
money.
question on that MOU?
If
Do
I
we-
could just finish the sentence.
Okay.
There's enough money in the budget now to cover that, so you wouldn't need to add anything or amend anything before then. But we could draft that MOU and bring it back to the council.
Do we have an MOU for all of the services Bragg does for us?
I don't know. I think
We don't need
some,
an MOU for this.
some of them we do, some of them we don't.
We voted on it as a Bragg board, and that position's fully done. And so it would just be a budget transfer item, not an MOU.
Yeah. Again, I don't know the technical procedures for moving it from one category to another one, but I bring that up as something that we need to be aware of in the budget.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carl.
Yeah.
Let's see, was that all of it? Oh. The last thing, I got hit up by an individual who wanted to know if the county could, and he said he talked to you, that Logan City was going to change their lease agreement with the zoo. That they were gonna maybe need some county funding or something to help with the zoo.
I'm not aware of any change in the lease. I did have a conversation with the zoo, and they told me that they have future capital improvement plans, and that they might come to us someday with a request, but I don't have any request right now from them. They've talked to me just about long-range future capital plans, but I'm not aware of any request at this point.
Okay. I double checked and called Logan City and said, what's going on here? He said, no, we don't have any issues. We don't want the zoo to move. They've got a lease that's coming up for renewal, but we have no intention of not renewing it. And by state code, we have to have a limited time lease. It's 5 years with 5 renewals or something like that, and they don't pay anything. So the person I talked to said that he thought maybe the county was interested in getting zoo property to expand the fairgrounds. But I hadn't heard anything at all about that.
Yeah, they told me that they're, and I don't know how public their plans are, how much I should say, but, they told me that if, they'd like to expand at some point. They're out of space there.
Zoo would, yeah.
Yeah.
Carl, were they asking for more funding than they get from RAPS then?
Yeah.
The one thing they were asking for, and we've got to check this, but they said that when RAPS was put into place, they were to get 10% of RAPS.
I think it says up to.
Up to 10%.
Rise up to 10%.
Apply for it.
It wasn't exactly,
And I haven't read it, I haven't checked into it, but they said it was supposed to be 10%.
I think that's pretty well what we have done, but it doesn't mean it can't be changed.
Yeah.
I still think we support the zoo pretty strongly.
I agree.
Okay. That was all. Oh, I did have one question. I saw a carryover, and it caught my eye because it was a capital project for the executive's office. And when I clicked on the line item, thanks to Cameron, I could figure out how to do that. And it was money for a new truck. It was on last year's budget, and it's on this year's budget for $72,000. And is there a reason why you didn't do that?
Just because it's been really hard to get vehicles, so, it hasn't been a priority, so we haven't,
Okay.
we talked to them, they were way back ordered. I think we have a purchase order out, but we're just waiting.
Okay, I just wondered why it was last year's, and then again, budget coming up.
It hasn't been done because they haven't had trucks.
I thought we were leasing. Are you actually purchasing a vehicle?
No, those vehicles are all purchased.
What year of vehicle you're driving right now?
It's, I believe it's a 2018.
That white truck's a 2018?
No, I don't know what year that one is.
Yours is silver, I think,
The
or
silver
gray,
one,
isn't it?
the silver one's 2018.
I am confused because I thought we were doing a rotating lease agreement and it was $36,000 each year for the executive and $36,000 each year for the deputy executive. Is that not the case?
That's the plan for going forward, is to get into those types of agreements because in the long run, they tend to be more financially advantageous because we can lease a vehicle, and historically, we could do that at less than market rate because we could get a government rate. And then if we turned it in after a year or so, they would resell it for sometimes more than market rate. We could potentially even make money off of that. But there are some vehicles that the county just outright purchased in the past. Most of the vehicles we had in the past were just outright purchases. But going forward, that's a better approach to be able to lease, because then you have a vehicle that's basically brand new all the time, and it's under warranty, and you don't have to worry about repairs or anything like that. And then before it gets out of warranty, you trade it in and get a new one and just constantly have a new one.
I'm glad
This
you
actually
brought
ought to be a pretty solid policy, because I know other departments are, that's what they are doing. They are leasing, I know fire, we talked about
Yeah,
that
I
today.
was thinking of
The
the
other day,
same
they're
thing.
leasing the trucks and they turn them back in, and they're maintaining a new fleet because they're able to turn that around within a year.
What?
Executive, the previous executive, that's what he was doing.
That's what I thought, yeah.
I didn't know the policy of, I won't say, I guess maybe it isn't a policy, but it sure worked out good then, but we decided not to do that now. I don't quite understand.
Well, we haven't decided not to do it. We have decided to do it, and it's something that I've been pushing our department heads to look at. It's not always the most advantageous. For example, with vehicles where we have to add a lot of equipment to them or modify them, sometimes it's not advantageous to do that. But, and also with specialized equipment, sometimes different vehicles are specialized. But especially our Public Works Director and our Fire Chief, I've talked to them about doing this, as well as several other department heads who have vehicles. And that has been my direction to them, is to look at leasing the vehicles for all the reasons that I stated. And we did this when I was at Nibley. We saved thousands of dollars on each vehicle. Sometimes we made money on vehicles because we were able to turn them around in a time period where we were able to basically sell them for more than what we paid for them. So it has been our practice, and each department head looks at each vehicle and works with, we have a consultant that we work with to do this called Bancorp, and their employee who assists us is a former county employee, actually. He used to work for the Sheriff's Office, Mike Peterson. So he's very familiar with our needs, and the Sheriff's Office uses this as well for their vehicles. It's a great program, and it's something that we use whenever it's advantageous. And there are a couple of other companies that do this too, and we've reached out to them. And so far, what we found is this company that we're working for has the best terms.
That brings up another thing I noticed going down through all the line items. There was an expense listed for, I can't remember what it's termed, anyway, turning in leases or converting leases to purchases or something like that. Did anybody else see that?
I didn't see that.
It was almost between a few departments, it was almost $1 million. And I didn't know what that was. Do you know anything about that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe Cameron knows what you're referring to.
Well, I think we should probably keep the discussion up here. You know, I'm glad we have the executive, and he put a lot of work into this budget, so I appreciate hearing from him.
You give me too much credit, Paul.
You took it. So.
This is mostly Cameron and his staff. They do the majority of the work on this. They ask me for direction on a few things here or there, but really our staff deserves the credit. They're the ones who work really hard on this, and they know the details. And our department heads as well. The department heads each build their own department budget, and they know their budgets. And if we really want to dig into details, we should invite department heads and staff.
Had that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
you guys have been doing
I
that.
guess I just want to say I'm a little confused. This council is a part-time council, and we spend our time looking over these budgets and delving into them in detail. And there was a press release and then a 5-page follow-up from you about how this council really wasn't well-versed in the budgetary process, and we didn't understand the details. And you did. In that press release and in that follow-up, you didn't talk about department heads. You talked about you. And now you're here, and you talked about how we didn't have conversations with you. Well, we want to have conversations with you. In public, we want them to be professional, and we want you to tell us how you developed the budget that is proposed by the county executive. We're all familiar with it. We expect you to be familiar with it, and we want to know the details. So, I think we should keep the discussion here.
Gordy's been through this budget process for what, 14 years now? 16 years?
16?
16 years. And the rest of us have been through it a lot of times, so we kind of know what we're doing.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the last thing I had was
Okay, thanks, Carl.
wondering what that was,
Appreciate the
and
feedback.
that's something that we can get an answer to probably at some point in the future before we pass the final budget.
Can we have, and I understand the fluctuation between lease and buying, but it would seem more consistent if we applied leasing throughout the county. Then as a council, as a group, they all know what's going on. And I understand that we add equipment and everything else to these vehicles, but that seems to be universities, sheriffs, everything else that way. Especially, I mean, I agree with Gina, we're headed for a possible recession, and I'm like, anything we can do that's cutting money on that is time to be frugal and cutting back. And I think we as a council said that if we were giving raise to our people, which we value, we've really got to look at cutting, and at times it's going to hurt, but we've got to be there and ready to do that. So,
Well said.
Yeah, I like that idea. If you'd like, we could draft a policy that talks about the approach for purchasing versus leasing, and prioritizes leasing versus purchasing, and maybe it could identify some of the exceptions when purchasing might be more appropriate, and we could have that to be able to give to the department heads as guidelines on how to handle vehicle purchases and leasing.
I think as Executive Secretary did mention in it, and I think you're right, in the event that there are certain pieces of equipment that you purchase, and then you've got to put a lot of special equipment on it in order to do the job, and that would probably be exempt from that lease program if it's advantageous to keep them in the fleet for longer than a year. But other than that, I think we're all in agreement that we need to lease if we can, because it, I think what Chief Hammer told us in the fire board meeting, that they can get a new pickup, they can run it for a year and turn it back, and when they turn it back, they have to pay $3,500 for the whole year. You can't get a better deal than that. And so I'm thinking that that's probably we're all headed that way.
warranty-wise and everything else, it's good.
Yeah,
And if anybody's adding equipment, it's the fire department, so.
yeah, the fire department
The sheriff.
and the sheriff. Imagine the sheriff puts a lot more miles on it than most people, so then that lease would be different. But it's all on condition of the vehicle coming back off lease, and so that would change the lease program. But I think we should, I mean, we're smart enough, we can crunch the numbers and we can figure out if it's a good idea to turn them over in a year, or if keep them longer, but the longer you keep them, the less value you have.
That's right.
So I think we've decided as a council that the lease idea is good, and I think the executive understands that, so you need to move on.
Great. All right. Anyone else that want to start?
I have a couple of things, but I'll wait my turn. Gina's in line.
Oh,
Oh, should we go in line?
okay, we can go.
Started there.
I guess so, I guess we did. Okay,
I figure the time you get done, Gina, we
Might as well be answered.
we might be tired enough, we'll just bag ours.
yeah, I don't know about that, but I did spend a lot of time going through this. So as Carl mentioned about moving the Economic Development Director, we also need to update the budget as we are combining the Public Defender's Office with Box Elder and Rich County.
I was wondering about that as well.
So we need to get that taken care of as well, so that can start January 1. So probably can get some numbers from Mike. Paul and I have been working with Mike on that and stuff, so that's another thing that we should do, and hopefully we'll see some savings there. That was the intent, to be more efficient, to help people who need a public defender, and to save us some money as well. Okay, here's a couple, this is a hard question that I've been trying to figure out. I don't know how you guys feel about this. Now, this is the original budget we got on the 13th, because I had it printed out because that's how my brain works. So I'm concerned about what's going on with the recorder's fees. And if I can look at the page. As you know, county council does not set those fees. They're set in state law, and because they're set in state law, we can't change them. We just have to go with what they give us, whether or not they actually cover or actually are more than what that department needs. And in the past, with our former recorder, a lot of that money went back into general fund to pay for other things, because really he saw we were kind of overcharging. He didn't need all that funding to pay for what he was doing. Now, I understand our new recorder has a different way of doing things. I totally get that, but one of the concerns that I have on my copy, on the account detail on page 68, 2023 request for seasonal employees from the recorder's office is $245,000. And where this year, the estimate was 20,000 and year-to-date was 9,000. I feel like that is too much. He's already, I just don't understand why he needs that much for seasonal employees.
That's for next year?
Yeah, for
In
next
the
year.
recorder's office?
Yeah.
In the recorder's office.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's money that is in the recorder's office that really is an overcharge that we should be putting back in the general fund more so than what it's been reduced to. I don't think it's fair to put all that money in one department because he believes it's his money, and I understand that he sees it that way. But it's not fair to have to balance the budget on the backs of everybody else when he has more money than he knows what to do with. And I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I wanted to bring that up.
I circled that when I was looking through this, that it jumped from 2022 from, like you said, 20,800, and now 23 tentative is 244,000. And I was wondering why there was such a big jump there also.
And that would be interesting. In 2017, the recorder's office had 4 employees, and at the end of 2021, the recorder's office had 8 employees, so they already doubled the number of full and part-time employees from 2017 to 2021. So then to bring in seasonal employees on top of that next year, after we just funded them for $100,000 to do scanning, seems to be quite a increase.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like to me, and it seemed like there should be money there that we should be able to put back in the general fund that comes out of the recorder's fees, rather than having it go to these.
I will give him credit. That's one of the few miscellaneous accounts that actually went down.
Yes, that's true. It did, and I appreciate that as well. So that's something that we need to take a closer look at and rework that, because I think there's some money there that could go back in to help balance the municipal services fund rather than how it has been balanced. Which, maybe you guys have this too, but let me bring it up. I was concerned with how that got balanced, where we were originally in the 913 budget. We were $2.4 million short in the municipal services fund, and part of the things to balance that was to take road maintenance down $125,000 and to take chip and seal the roads down $335,000 is what I did the math when I compared this budget with the latest budget that I had. I'm really concerned about that. I think we need to keep on the maintenance schedule that we have to make sure that we're taking care of our roads. I think it's going to be more costly to hold that off. The wear and tear plus the materials will probably cost more in the future, and so I do not want to see that budgeted items, those budget items go down. I think it's critical that we are taking care of our roads.
That ties into what I was gonna ask.
Yeah, go
because
ahead.
We talked, Dirk said that balance came from reducing municipal services, yet it was stated that municipal services, the road, is gonna stay the same budget as was this year. So I can't quite see how that came across that way,
I
but.
can explain that if you like.
But is it coming from COG or what? I mean, we need to keep budget for that municipal services.
So, and this is the misunderstanding that I referred to. The way that we approach the budget this year has been different. It's different than it was last year. I can't really speak to years before that because I wasn't here. But the way we did it last year is, I didn't present a budget to you until it was all done, clean, tidy, balanced, and then handed it over to you. This year, the council expressed that they wanted to be involved in the budget development process. And so a couple months ago, we showed you a budget that was in the development process, and it was a draft budget. And it showed some of the requests in there that were coming from departments. For example, Public Works wanted more money for road maintenance. So the council saw that budget, and it was not balanced yet. It was still in process. It was a working draft. Had we followed last year's approach, you wouldn't have seen that. We would have cleaned it up, balanced it, given you our proposal, and it would have been all clean and balanced the first time you saw it. And this is the sausage making I referred to. This is balancing a budget and figuring out what the priorities are. It's a lot of work. It's difficult because you have to look at all of the requests, and there are always more requests than there's money available. And so the difficult part then is figuring out how you're going to prioritize things. And so I get first crack at prioritizing, and then you guys get the last crack at prioritizing. And so what you saw then was a bunch of requests, which we didn't have the cash flow to be able to fund all of those. The only way that those could have been funded would have been to use money from fund balance. So after that draft budget was shared with the council, some members of the council were very critical of that, publicly even, and stated their desire to not have those funds from fund balance used to balance that. So based on that, we looked at all of those requests, and hearing that the council didn't like that approach, we looked at them and did not propose increasing those funds. However, if the council does want to increase those, the department would love that. They have those needs. Their costs of everything are going up. If the council would like to put that money back in there, you won't hear any complaint from the Public Works Department. They would love to have those additional funds to do that. In order to have a balanced budget without using all of that fund balance to make that happen, it wasn't possible in the Municipal Services Fund because of the amount of revenue coming in. But the council has full discretion to change that. If you want to bump those numbers back up, you can do that. But what we proposed was to keep the numbers the same as they were last year.
I want to respond.
I would
Go ahead,
love
Paul.
the opportunity to address all that. The first thing I'd like to say is I love sausage. I love sausage making, and I think this whole council does as well.
It's not gluten-free.
It is a misstatement to say that this council's never been involved in seeing requests from departments initially versus what they come out to. That's what these budget hearings that all of these council members have been involved in for years have happened. That's number one. We're all here. 7 people have been here for multiple years. That is what's happened, and that is a fact. And we're not going to get out of fact. We're not going to get away from facts.
I'm not denying that part.
Okay, so we've been involved in those. We've seen departments request funds, and we've seen them cut. We're used to seeing that. That's number one. So, number two, road department. Let's talk about that for a minute. Well, first, I want to hit this other thing. You said use of fund balance. Does your budget, 2023, use fund balance in it?
Where?
Does it use fund balance, yes or no?
In the Municipal Services Fund, there is some fund balance still
Okay.
being used for a carryover project, but other than that carryover project that was approved in previous years, we got rid of all the rest of the fund balance.
Does it use fund balance in any other funds?
Yeah, in the general fund, there's fund balance
Thank
for
you.
a variety of different projects.
And has this council used fund balance in prior years?
Oh, I'm sure the council.
Yes, we
used it
have.
many times.
So we are very used to using that. That is not something that we're concerned with. So to say that we're concerned, or we gave direction not to use fund balance, is inaccurate, at best.
Well,
At best, and I let you finish. 2019, road projects. Total cost, these are for road projects, this isn't even including employees and things. $5.28 million, 2019. Have we seen inflation?
Big time.
The cost, I believe I heard you say the cost of asphalt's gone up dramatically. Your current budget for roads, 5.7 million. Down to, almost not even keeping pace with inflation. We need to fund roads dramatically. And we're gonna talk about some of the budget numbers when it gets to me.
And may I add that Councilman Zillis and I met with the Municipal Services, the road department, and they had actually estimated that they needed more money than what was budgeted, and that was what dropped my concern. So back to what's been stated, the council very much is involved with the interdepartments and everything else and seeing what's going on with their budget. And so Mr. Zillis and I met with them, and then they said, given what's going on and what Gina mentioned, the maintenance and everything else and what's coming on there, you know, we came away like, not only did they need their budget now, but they need more. And that's where my concern is we said we cut it and we're the same. So we're just saying we really need to look at that roadside and seeing where we can get some money from there, because I think that's important.
Well, and that's why it's, not wisdom in today's economy to pay off that low-interest debt.
Exactly. We should drag that on as long as we can at that rate.
And I think we have a responsibility to the citizens of Cache County to do as much as we can for the roads. If anything that gets the biggest complaints from our citizens is roads and road work, and we need to give the road work department those funds to help maintain what we need to do as a county to provide good customer service.
And safety.
And safety, yeah.
Absolutely.
Building on what Nolan said, I talked to Matt. Well, he and Nolan and I met with Matt, and we told him that money was tight and whatnot, and so before he presented his last estimate to be considered in his budget, he said, I cut $1 million out of it. He said there was $1 million more that I needed to do to maintain the roads, and he said, I cut it $1 million, and then he said, I presented it, and he says, I can't really tell for sure, but he says, it appears to me that he's lost another $1 million in this final addition to what we have seen. And so his particular department has really championed a lot of the money that has been cut. And of course, every department in the county has got to tighten their budgets. And so, you know, he shouldn't be above and beyond that, but we need to really be careful that we get him the adequate thing to at least maintain the road projects that he needs to keep the roads about the way. As on my way in tonight, we the people, and that was the big subject, is that how bad the rural roads are in the state of Utah, not just in Cache County and Box Elder, but throughout the state. And they say, why have they gotten so bad? And they say, well, all the votes don't come from out in those rural roads. It comes from in the cities. And that's probably a pretty good explanation. But I know the rural roads are really in bad shape. And no one's denying that, you know. The council here isn't denying that, and the executive's not denying that. It's just a situation that somewhere in the budget process, we got to do the best we can.
I agree, Gordy.
I wanted to respond to something the executive said about the budget process. That is, the council was never informed that somehow we were getting a draft of a draft when we got the budget on September 13th. In fact, I sent you an email, Mr. Zook, if you remember, asking why it was late, and you had every opportunity to explain then that this was just a draft, and that you were planning on giving us a new budget, an updated budget, at the end of October. No such information was given to me or to the council. And in the past, I went through and I've looked at our budgets that we've got. They say draft on them, so there was nothing to indicate, as you look through the pages where it says draft in the background, that like a watermark, we've had that before. So there was nothing to indicate this was anything different than what we've done before. So it would have been extremely helpful to this council if you would have communicated your intent of what you're doing with us. Second, I want to make it perfectly clear that the reason that this council had the department budget request was because we asked for them. They were not something that the executive's office said, oh, here you guys go. It was something that we asked for at the end of June, knowing that they were coming in the 1st of July. And that is a fact, and I can show the email if anybody wishes to see it, where I asked for them on behalf of the council. So I think it's important to understand that the budget process has been really confusing this year and rather frustrating to all of us, as we've said, because there's not been proper communication from your office on when we were getting it, or that this was just a draft. I mean, it's been really frustrating. I just want to clarify what the facts were concerning those issues.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback, Councilmember Worthen, and I apologize for the confusion that there has been. And this is good feedback for us to build a better process for next year. Cameron did propose a calendar, and I know you proposed a calendar too, and I think part of the confusion was we just never settled on which calendar we were going to use or if we were going to do a hybrid. But I definitely think that would be a good thing for us to do first next year, to develop a calendar, make sure everybody is on board with, understands the timing of that calendar, and I think that would be very helpful next year.
I certainly appreciate that, and I do think that that is a very good idea, and I will make it also known that the calendar that Cameron put forth in my calendar were not that different, and neither one of them had the council getting the budget in September or the council getting an additional budget the end of October. So that wasn't even in anybody's thinking. Cameron's calendar had us getting the budget the end of July. We usually get it in August. That's been the practice.
It's been really interesting that I know over the past several years since I've been on the council, it's just been interesting to watch because we've always had a budget committee, and they used to meet monthly, and they worked through several things, and they made a lot of suggestions, and they reported back to the council. And it just seemed, well, I know it, when we would receive the budget, even a lot earlier, there wasn't any big surprises, and there wasn't any anything that well, we'd already know about it, and things that we could just work through, and there's always kind of, oh, we need to look into this deeper because we're having some issues here. There just wasn't the big surprises, and then we would it seemed like we would work through it because our two representatives from the council that were kind of helping out and being educated by that budget committee, of which a timeline was set several years ago. I know Cameron worked with us on that several years ago, and I thought it was working great until that all got scrapped, and the committee was never brought together anymore, especially this year. And so I guess that new process that's happening right now, that's why we are being hit with all these kind of this immediate changes and what's going on here. We have a lot of questions because I think the invitation for us to work with you, Executive Zook, is well, it just didn't happen all year long like it has in the past. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback, Councilmember Erickson. I think, in fact, maybe we could increase the number of council members on the budget committee to 3.
We're at 3.
There's 3 on there now.
We're at 3 already.
We're at 3.
And I think we could do the same thing with our schedule for next year, and maybe pre-plan which budget committee meetings will be about the budget. One of the things that happened over the past year and a half is that our budget committee kind of got hijacked by all the ARPA discussions and everything we had to figure out related to that. And that took up agenda time and means that we could have and probably should have spent on the actual budget. I do think we absolutely could and should communicate better than we have been. That has been very problematic. For example, Councilmember Erickson, I would love to meet with you sometime. I think that would be great if we actually sat down and had a discussion.
And to that point, why did you not schedule budget hearings and give us the opportunity to meet with you and the staff? If you're very curious and want to reach out and meet with us, why are those public meetings and those budget hearings always being canceled?
The way that we've been handling it is just bringing everybody to the department heads to the council meetings so that all of the council could hear those requests in a public meeting.
My question was, why were the budget committee meetings
Budget
canceled?
committee, yeah.
Or not scheduled by you? That was my question.
Yeah, the way that it's been handled as long as I've been here is it's a set date on the calendar, and they're already pre-scheduled throughout the year.
Yes.
And then as we come each month, when we have one, Janine will check with Cameron or see if there are conflicts. There have been some that have been canceled because of scheduling conflicts, and there have been some that were canceled because I was told there were no agenda items. Clearly, we could have and should have had more of these meetings to help have these discussions, and that's something we'll do next year, is make sure we have plenty of these.
I guess my last follow-up question would be, an agenda item isn't to have communication with the council? That's not one of your agenda items?
That has not been a standing agenda item, but maybe that's something that we could add in the future, is just a generic update to make sure everybody is up to date on what's going on and any questions get answered. That's a good idea.
Well, that's the purpose of that committee. And all that was going on with the budget, to not have any agenda items baffles me, because we could have been talking about these issues. We could have talked about the policy on the lease. We could have been talking about the stuff with the recorder's office. All the stuff we're bringing up tonight could have been brought up to the 3 council members in the budget meeting, and we could have passed it on to the rest of the council. So that there was no agenda items and wanting to work with us, you didn't want to meet with us, completely baffles me.
One thing I found interesting is on one of your news items, you said that there's input. I just want to mention that the council members aren't putting input on that budget meeting. We're there to see what's coming and going on from there. I mean, we're not aware of what's going on there. So the input part, I'd like to clarify, is the council members go to the meeting to be informed, and we're not inputting anything in there, nor is it required or asked of us to do that, because we don't know what's been spent so far and where we're at. So,
Are you referring to the budget committee meetings?
yes.
Okay, thanks.
Should I go on to the other things I had? Okay, this is completely different subject. But as a representative of the Northeast District who pays for their own fire, I'm really trying to understand why we have 1,048,000 in taxes going to ambulance fund and $1.3 million going to the fire. This is out of property and sales tax. And it's not that I object to these folks. They do a great job for us, so I don't want them to think that I'm trying to pick on them, but my constituents already pay. In fact, North Logan has one of the highest, the residents pay one of the highest bills for fire protection in the state. So should not be the ambulance fund and its contracts be supporting itself? Why are we supporting it through property and sales tax? It looks like it's about half. And, you know, Chief Hammer isn't here today, and I could call him, but I wanted to bring it up to the council because it is a concern that I have that we're not treating residents of the county equally and fairly.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Councilmember Worthing. This is something that needs to be fixed. It's a broader policy issue that the council is going to need to tackle. It is likely to result in some shifting of costs. Well, it will. And it is from a policy perspective, the people receiving the service are the ones who should be paying for it. Although many times in government, things are subsidized by other people because there's a greater common good. But that is something that we're going to need to tackle, and something that Chief Hammer and I have discussed. And his plan is to look at, and he is looking at it, and we did talk about this briefly at our last fire board meeting, looking at costs now that they've been in operation for a while, reevaluating what the costs are and what the contract amounts are with the contract cities. And that's likely where the cost is going to end up unless there's another funding mechanism developed or approved by the council.
Okay, and then, so I just wanted that to be on our radar. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was, okay, so the municipal services budget that was 2.4 million short, balanced some of that with cutting money from the roads department, but it also balances with charges for services, an increase of, it looks like $35,000, and an increase in licenses and permits of about $500,000. And I don't understand how we can foresee that when the economy is slowing down. That doesn't seem like that's a reliable number that we should be using to balance a budget.
I think Barbara had some questions on that, and I do as well, so we'd love to see why those numbers change dramatically. I know that the executive's well-versed in the budget, so we'll love to hear from him.
I did agreeing with you, Gina. On the very first page, we have animal licenses. We have 000 through the 2022 budget, and then all of a sudden, on 23, we have a tentative $70,000. How can we, say that's going to happen? For one thing, we don't have anything to compare it against, and for another thing, how are those going to be paid? How can we even start there and add that into the budget?
Executive, $70,000 in animal license fees?
Yeah.
How did you come to add that into the budget?
I did not add those into the budget. Those came from departments. After meeting with the finance director, I asked him to check with department heads about the revenue amounts, and they had discussions, and some of them were revised, and some of the revenue projections come from the finance department directly. For example, sales tax. They have trend analyses that they do to look at what kind of sales tax has been coming in and what they expect to get. But from what they've told me, their trend analyses have been very accurate in the past, and so I trust them in their opinion on that. The department heads are the ones who are on the front lines collecting the fees, building permits, animal licenses, things like that, and I trust them as far as their recommendations as well. But if you have questions or would like more details about their recommendations, we can call them.
Question on that. All these fees that we're gonna say are going to pay for all these things, are we proposing that these fees increase, or are we just having, for example, a lot of more people get married next year?
We're gonna get way into the weeds on this, but we're gonna let Barbara go.
I guess, have we not kept track of, for example, animal licenses in the past? I just wonder where this comparison came up to when we don't even have any balances to compare it to. That's one of my questions there. And as Dave brought up, marriage licenses also increased from the 22 budget from 40,000 to 23, 60,000. Are we increasing our fees, or do we expect that many more people to be married in 2023?
Barbara, that's 400 more marriages if we don't increase fees.
Okay. So, I'm wondering where they're coming up with their positions there. And again, down on municipal election contracts, and maybe it's just because I don't understand some of this, but in the 2022 budget, we have again a zero balance, but yet for 23, they're forecasting a need of 250, or not a need, but they're going to have a $215,000 difference there. I'd like to know again where those contracts are coming from, and if they are there, why haven't we, collected that before in 2022?
Mr. Zook, where do those contracts come from?
I did not make any changes to any of the budgets from the other elected officials. If you have questions about specific things in their budget, my recommendation would be that you talk to them.
Who signs contracts for the county, Mr. Zook?
That would be the executive.
That would be you. And so we have $215,000 in municipal elections contracts in the coming year. Have you signed those contracts?
No,
How did that number get into the budget?
you'll need to talk to the election official about that.
That would be your budget that's proposed by the county executive. Did you not review it for accuracy before you published it and sent out a press release?
If the purpose of today's meeting is to.
The purpose of today's meeting is to
inform
understand the
everyone-
budget.
Yeah, if the purpose of today's meeting is to understand and to get answers to questions, then I would recommend that we ask the people who have those answers. If your purpose is to point out that I don't know the answer to every question in this budget, then I don't know the answer to every question about every line and every number in this budget. I will freely admit that. If we actually want more information and you want answers, then some of those answers we'll need to ask department heads, we'll need to ask our finance director, we'll need to ask other elected officials.
Well, I think the reason that we're here tonight, Mr. Zook, is we had a budget that we all had pretty good understanding of in a draft, a tentative budget that changed dramatically, that was sent to us a minute after our meeting started at the last council meeting. It was sent by you, proposed by you, with significant changes that you signed off on. And we're here to ask questions about those significant changes. And you sit here today and tell us you don't have any of the answers and don't know why those changes were in place.
No, that's not what I said.
That's what you just said. Why don't you repeat, so I maybe misunderstood?
The way the budget process works is departments make proposals. Some of those department heads are elected officials. And out of the elected official budgets that were proposed, I did not change any of their budgets. I did not personally direct any changes to be made to any of their budgets. If you have questions about any of those elected official budgets, my recommendation, in order for you to get the most accurate information, would be to ask them about what's in their budget. In fact, I would recommend the same thing regarding all of the department budgets. While I am responsible for the budget, I am not as much of an expert on each individual department's budget and each individual line item in this budget as the department heads are. They are far more knowledgeable about these things. They can tell you what the history is on the numbers, where it came from, why it changed, what the trends are, as well as our finance department. So if we really want the best information and to answer questions, then that's the way we should do it. If it's your intent to prove some point that I don't know certain details about the budget, then I will concede that point to you and give that to you, that I do not know every detail about every line of these thousands of accounts in our budget. That's why we have a team. We have a team that works together to do this budget. And yes, should the executive and the council work together better on this budget? Absolutely. I'm making lots of notes, and I'm sure you all are as well, and as is our staff, on ways that we can improve this process for next year. I think we can make a lot of improvements to this process. But one of the things that we need to start with is we need to work together. We need to communicate. We need to not, when we bring you a budget and point out to you that we have great needs, then it's not helpful to go out and publicly criticize and accuse me of having a budget with a $2 million deficit and when the budget's not even done yet. Those are the kinds of things that hamper communication, that make it more difficult for us to work together. Instead, we should be sitting down and talking to each other, asking questions with the real intent of finding the answer, not proving a point.
Can I just,
Sure.
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest that maybe instead of throwing criticisms at each other, that instead we direct specifically questions at the budget itself,
The numbers, yeah.
at the numbers.
That's, and I'd like to ask a question on the numbers, Carl, and I would like to ask it to the elected official that planning and zoning reports up to. Who's the elected official the planning and zoning reports to? Mr. Executive.
Me.
Okay. We're going into a recession. I think the Fed chairman has said that there's going to be some pain. Bloomberg says there's a 100% chance of a recession. building permits, it appears, have dropped off the face of the cliff, and zoning and subdivision fees are staying about the same, but building permits, you're showing is going from 1 million to 1.35 million next year. And in your email to us, you also said that our fees are all woefully low. We're in a housing crisis. We need to do all we can to make sure that the cost of housing is going down. You have building permits going up by over 30% next year. Are you projecting we're going to be doing more building permits in a arena where things aren't getting built, or are we going to be raising permit fees on building that will then exacerbate the housing crisis?
This is an estimate that came from the department, and if you don't agree with the estimate, you can change it.
Well, I was just saying, you're the elected official. I was wondering where it came from in your department.
What I said is I did not change the budgets of the other elected officials.
This is your budget.
Yes.
I just wanted to know where that 350,000 came from.
That came from the department's proposal.
Was that after the September 13th budget? You went back in and said, do you see it going up? Because that's when it increased. So that's confusing to me.
Yes, I had that conversation with Cameron and about what the estimates should be, and then he had a conversation with the department head, and they came up with a number.
I have just maybe a couple more things that I would just like to bring to attention and ask. On elections, on material supplies and services, in the 2022 budget, there was over 372,000, that was used for that, and then it dramatically went down for 2023 to 77,000. Can you enlighten me on how come we spent so much money? Was that part of getting that office out at this airport, or was it machinery for elections, or what was it? And why has it gone down so dramatically? Do you have an answer for that, or can enlighten us on that?
I'd be happy to ask
Okay.
Bradfield to come next time and give you a full
Yeah,
explanation.
I'd like, and
Barbara,
the
I
other
can
thing.
walk you through why that's the case.
Okay,
when we're
thank
done
you.
here.
I guess, and the other thing on the elections for part-time employees, 2022 budget has 50,700, yet for 23 it has 69,300. Are we really going to increase our part-time employees that much in elections for next year, when in actuality it's not an election year, correct, for 2023? It's an off year. So why are we increasing that so much for 2023? And again, I guess I can probably talk to Jess on that. I have other things that I have, but we don't want to be here all night, and I'm going to pass the time on to who would like to go next. Thank
I guess
you.
I'll just have one thing, and it gets to those budget projections, and I think the right elected officials here, the executive who oversees the finance department, he said that the finance department has done some projections, and I think I just want to clarify, as I've looked at the sales tax revenue increases, I was going to ask some questions about why those projections were there, but I think the executive's told us he's not conversant on those details. Is that correct?
Are you referring to the sales tax
Yes.
projection?
The sales tax projection for 2020. Are you conversant enough with the details to talk with me about it, or should we just talk to Cameron?
With the sales tax revenue, as I stated earlier, the finance department has trend analyses that they perform on those, which have been historically accurate. They performed an analysis and determined what they thought would be an appropriate amount for this year's budget and put that in there, and I trust their analysis.
Okay, so you didn't ask about that analysis and how they arrived at those numbers? No, okay. I think for the council, that number is the highest increase in county history and well over the trend. I'm not saying anything by the finance department. I've actually talked to them, and I do understand those trends, and I think that they did a great job of coming up with those. So I appreciate them talking to me about how they trend analysis things. We are moving into some really choppy waters economically, and historical trends that they've used, you probably should put a little asterisk next to, just because of how much things are changing. We have sales tax scheduled to increase by $1.5 million next year. I think even if you look at the trending, that is going to be aggressive. And I think we should probably take the top line budget down by $300,000 to $600,000. I mean, I'm really conservative, because I think if we take it down $600,000 and we miss, that just means we got more money and we're in a good place. But I think we need to take that down, because that is going to, I believe, put us in a deficit position next year. I don't believe sales tax is going to increase by 17%, even with the inflation that we have going, and even with some of the things coming in, because our long-term rates are 10% on average and about $641,000. So I would say we take the top line of our budget and just take, conservatively, $600,000 right off the top, but I think that I'd be absolutely willing to go to 300, but I think we need to take a good chunk off the top for those trends. And I appreciate the finance department sharing those trends with me so I can understand them.
Paul, I totally agree with you on that, and even if they were that high, it could be because the cost of everything goes up, so as you pay more at the grocery store, you're gonna pay more tax, but then the county's also having to pay more, so it doesn't do us any good to input that in as though it's extra money. That doesn't make any sense to me. And I am really concerned about the choppy waters, and that is what we have in the budget for sales tax is a very, very rosy projection that we need to take down.
That's all I've got.
Thank you, Paul. Nolan?
A lot of my questions have already been asked. I would like to point out that, as was mentioned here before, excluding me, this council is very well versed on budgets. I don't see the weaknesses that were described on that. I think the council has spent a lot of time digging through things. I appreciate Cameron and the finance department. I appreciate all the departments we have in the county. I think all of the council appreciates the departments, and that's why, therefore, we gave a COLA raise to them, because we understand the importance of our county employees, and we want to recognize them for that. But I also want to recognize that with the service that these council members have done, that they understand a lot of the budget. If there's weaknesses, it's because the process has changed and it's been different than what they've seen. And I think we've discussed that, but it has been challenging. But I do believe these council members have a lot of history and a lot of points on there. And this discussion tonight has been very, very helpful. I appreciate all the questions. It helps me in understanding all of those things. So just so the county citizens know, this council is serving and doing their best, putting a lot of time into it. This is an extra meeting tonight, time being put into it, and I don't know how much time has been spent by each council member reviewing the budget, talking about the budget. It's a lot of our time spent on that for this council. So point set on that.
Thank you, Nolan. Gordy?
Many of the things that I had written down that was a concern have been discussed, and so there's no use talking about the same thing. There were two items that were cut that was concerning to me because of my background in the county and the different things that I've been involved in. One of them is a conservation district for 25 or more years have had a contribution from the county, and I'm assuming that those individuals that went through the budget don't have any clue as to what the conservation district does. It's an elected group of farmers that have the task to spend all of the ASCS money that comes from the government. They meet in committee. Different farmers apply for these different little grants and different little things that the farmers can request, and the SAS office meets, and they go over it very, very closely, and they're the one that's commissioned to recommend how that money's spent. The one thing that comes to mind is a handful of years ago, and some of you will remember this, there was a road out in Paradise that had washed out, and that particular washout qualified for one of the grants that you could get from the Conservation District. The Conservation District discussed it, and they turned around and wrote a check to the county so that that road in Paradise could be repaired. So not only do they assist and help the farmers on their SAS money that comes in and can be applied for, but they also, in possibilities, they can give money to the county on specific projects if they qualify. But anyway, I would really petition the council that we not do that, because they depend on that money, and we do a lot of taxing of the farmers' land. Farmers, don't necessarily get much access to that money that they get taxed on, and this is one way that we can help them in their projects. The second one is the bee inspection. I don't know if anybody remember back when we had the big bee conflict here, and we got educated pretty well as a council on what the county bee inspector does. His assignment is when all the bees are going to be loaded up in the fall and shipped to California so that they can pollinate the almond orchards and all that. You can't ship any of those bees into California unless they've been inspected and stamped that they're free of disease. Not only that, it's his responsibility to make sure that if there is any contaminated bees, that he can put them on a situation where they don't transfer around in the county and they're there until they get healthy or they get destroyed. I would suggest that the $2,500 that we give the bee inspector, that not be cut. So there's two things there that I seen when I went through the budget with a watchful eye that I think that we've cut out, because I'm getting mad at those who cut it out don't understand the agricultural side of things. But I guess that's why I'm here, is I'm from agriculture and I look out for their interests. Paul, you got a question?
How much was that conservation? It was 2,500 for the bees and the conservation district? 6,000. Okay.
And there's two districts. There's the Nibley Blacksmith Fork, and then there was what's the one up here, North Cache Conservation District. So it would be $3,000 per district that money has been supporting them. I mean, I was on the Conservation District for quite a few years before I was on the council, so I'm talking that I'm aware of at least 25 years that has always came from the county. And so I guess I don't know how I petition those who will finalize the budget, but that's one thing that I'll keep my eye on and encourage you to put back in the budget.
Well, I know we're all trying to conserve open space. We might as well keep those farmers making it useful, so I'm on your side. And I think we got somebody that can run some bees clandestinely for us in the room.
As Councilman Zillis mentions, this is appropriating hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, it is an amount that literally is infused into our economy, that goes to businesses and all that. And that little 6,000, we see these investments in the rest of the county and that generate, an amazing amount of money, and this is also one of them. So that's a minimal
Very
investment.
minimal. It's money well spent, in my opinion. I've seen it happen. I see what it does.
Well, I think I've got it down on my notes to
So
make
do I.
sure that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I guess I got to sit down with Cameron, who's the master budget man, teach him a little bit about agriculture. Cameron? I'll throw the dart at you, Cameron. I know that you're not the one that's supposed to receive it, but be aware, you do still have an agriculture man on the council, and he'll watch you close.
And I think there is a budget where they used to be like a one-line item department. I think they've been moved to be more concise, so I'm double checking on where they're at.
Yeah, I can't remember what page it was on. I looked at it in depth last night, and then
Yeah, I just showed it to you.
anyway, I should have written that down so I could give you the page that it's on, but it's just a single item and it was zipped out, so. It didn't even have 15 lines, it just had one. 6,000 last year and 6,000 the year before, and ZAP for next year. All right, that's all I have, Barbara.
Thank you, Councilman Zillis. Councilman Erickson.
You know, like, again, several of the items which I had for discussion have also been discussed. But I know Councilman Ward, we talked about, and he had hesitations, I remember very vivid, on increasing when we start hiring additional people, like a policy analyst for the council. And it's just my impressions that I noticed the budget for the council went up, but other entities did not go down. And I was hoping to see that if we were going to have policy analysts for the council, that we would probably bring that policy analyst from another department, and it hadn't happened. So I guess I'm saying that if as we need more, then maybe another department should actually need less. So I think that's one thing. And I did have one other question on, we've had a 2-year increase from 0 to 52,000 to now 75,000 on the section corners, which I guess they've been wrong for all these years. I guess something's happened there, and that sundry, and those sundry, I just bothers me, the sundry miscellaneous budgets, just a part of budgets just really rubbed me wrong, and I'm kind of curious as to that's the 9,000. So those are items that I've got some questions on as to, as to really why when we've really already got the personnel and we contract out the people to do these things, that all of a sudden now we have to have our own little pigeonhole of money. So I'm kind of curious who now addresses that out of there versus who the people, the professionals we used to have hired to go do that perfection process.
And I believe that's when you talk about section corners. I mean, that's the surveyor, correct?
Right.
Oh, okay.
It's the same people, we haven't changed.
They've asked for 75,000 more?
We're way behind on section corners for years and years, like you mentioned. We could do 10 times as much and not be caught up. So if the council feels like that's too much, they'll do whatever amount we have, they'll go do that many section corners. If we give them a lot more, they'll do a lot more. If we cut it out, they won't do any. It's critical for future development that we have accurate section corners. And we have some contractors who do a good job, but it's up to the council how much money you guys ultimately.
They is who?
We have 2 different contractors that we use. They're private contractors,
okay.
So they're not in-house. And it's the same people we've always had. We haven't changed it.
So we're not using in-house people to go, to detail and go out and see and
Nope.
and visit these corners and.
We have it for a long time.
Okay, that's what I had. So I think again that policy analyst was a huge issue. I think that the increase in our budget ought to be a decrease in someone else's. We're taking one policy analyst and moving them strictly to council.
Well, taking the funding.
One thing that I guess maybe I ought to do it on my own, but as I went through everybody's budget, they've always got office expense, office supplies, office this, office that, in every department. And we're not talking just small money, but we're talking thousands and thousands of dollars. Is there any way of having everyone work out of the same budget, so if they need something, they come to a central office supply thing? Because I'm guessing we're talking copiers, we're talking paper, we're talking that kind of thing. And I mean, every one of those departments have got thousands and thousands of dollars in office supplies. And I'm just wondering, is there any way that we can keep our eye on that and maybe lessen that? It's huge when you
Yeah.
get looking at every department with you know, thousands and thousands of dollars of office supplies. So anyway, that's just a thought that I had.
Okay.
Wasn't it the office supply budget last year that Cameron was able to dig up $900,000 that was left over, so we didn't raise taxes? That's what I
Yeah,
recall.
it was.
Is that right, Cameron?
Yeah.
He's shaking his head, yes.
I think maybe we better look at it again, Cameron. It's crazy.
Yeah. Could I mention that? That reminded me, Gordy. Also, the travel budget, some of them have gone up significantly.
Yeah, they have.
And I think that's one area where we can cut to be more efficient and watching our money during this, you know, the turbulent time that we foresee ahead. I'd like to take some of those travel budgets down.
We need to look at travel budgets, you know.
I agree with that, as in my company, travel budget has been cut because of Zoom and everything else. You're able to do remote, just like our citizens are having to do here with county council meetings. So lots of different technology that could curb that expense quite a bit.
All right. Do we have any other comments or anything else? Sorry.
I'm just wondering if Cameron can take what we've done and take what we've talked about and update the budget that we now have before us.
I took a lot of notes, but I'll have some questions for you, so.
I think we get back to what we discussed, and that is each department's got to feel the pain rather than picking on one or two. Each department's got to trim. I mean, we've recognized our employees. Now we just got to ask our employees to work smarter on this budget and everything else. So I'm hoping we see a reduction from each department rather than picking on one and saying that's going to happen. So that's my hope.
I've got a suggestion for the council, maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, but we've really all pointed out that we can't quite figure out what is the high expense in the clerk's office. I think I would like to direct whoever communicates with him that we would like a very, very, very detailed explanation of every line item in his budget.
Okay.
Because that seems to be a big concern. And I'd like also that we get the road, the road and the, and those individuals to share with us what they absolutely need in order to maintain the roads and the equipment that we need to maintain in that. Because I think they got hit really, really, really hard, and I don't know if they even, at least as of a week ago, they didn't even know for sure what they had left. And so I think it would be wise that we get Matt to sit down with his group and bring an itemized, fairly specific itemized budget as to where all that money goes and what he absolutely needs. And then we can maybe address that particular part of the county, because I hate to see us go backwards in the roads.
Okay.
And that's whenever I talk to people and they want to know what we do with our money, that's the first thing I tell, you know, you guys drive on those roads and they're good roads. And that's part of the thing that you get out of your taxes is you get those roads and they're usually fairly safe. And people will relate to that. So,
Councilman Erickson, you.
A lot of the questions we had tonight, they were from that kind of what you mentioned here, is that some of those are the departments that they haven't even come and shared anything with us. We haven't heard anything from clerks or recorders or executive's office, as far as all their departments. And I think they ought to share. When we ask all the departments to show up, that'd be great if they all showed up.
Are you suggesting a workshop for next meeting next week for these people to come in? Or what's your feelings on that?
I think those people that I suggested should come to a workshop, and
Okay.
because we have a lot of questions, and we ask the questions, but we aren't getting any answers because it's still not really sure how to answer it.
And I
At least the clerk and the recorder.
okay.
The clerk will, that's election day.
Oh, that's true. That is definitely true.
It's just a gut feeling, but.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Well, he probably don't have time to come in there.
Yeah.
We would have to excuse him, but we still need to really hear from him with a very, very, very specific itemized as to what all that money is. You know, everybody here said, how in the world on a non-election year are we gonna still allocate thousands and thousands of dollars more than this year? You
Okay.
can see it in 2 years, you know, in 2 years when we have a general election,
Right.
but not on an off election year.
Right.
Executive Zip did point out that it's municipal elections next year.
Shouldn't
Okay.
those contracts pay for themselves?
I didn't see the
Yeah,
revenue.
money still has to be shown in the
And
budget.
that was one of the questions, is why is contract income up so much higher?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, if that's what he needs to present for us to understand, so be it, that's okay. But
Right.
we all have a question.
Okay, I will get in touch with him. I don't know how much time he'll have between now and next Tuesday, but I'll definitely set up a meeting and then ask him to come in and present to us. Just for clarification, when is the budget to be finalized?
The last meeting of November.
Okay, last meeting of November, so we've got
Yeah, we
not
got
very
that.
much time.
But, and
But we're really pushed. We got
We're
a lot to
pushing the,
do.
yeah,
And I think if we're gonna give high-level direction, at least what I'd like to say, and if you guys run me out of town on a rail or not, but I'd love to see our revenues cut a little bit. I think those are projected to be too high.
I do
number
too.
one. I'd like to make those a little more conservative. I'd also like to make it very clear, because it's been said, this council doesn't like to use fund balance, but yet that's something we've done for years. And that's one of the benefits of having a fund balance, is we're not pinched and we don't have to raise taxes. This county has been financially well-managed for its history. I mean, you know, we talk about cash valley values. I'll tell you what my grandma always told me. What was it? Use it up, wear it out.
Make it do or
Make
do
it
it
do
now.
with that, yeah, yeah.
That's how we live in Cache Valley, and I think we need to do that here. And we can use some fund balance to make this budget work. You know, the budget that has to be balanced legally. I mean, it has to be balanced. That's a legal requirement, so we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back for having one. That's required. Number two, this council voted months ago not to raise taxes. So the budget can't have a tax increase in it. We forewent that a long time ago.
And we passed all the deadlines.
And we passed all the deadlines, so now we're comfortable using some fund balance, and we're definitely not paying off a bunch, so we will have some money there to allocate it.
Yeah, not paying off of $11 million in debt.
That we're actually, I think, gonna make a little money on.
Yep.
And that big chunk of $11 million changes this whole thing.
It does.
It will.
It will.
Basically, we're starting from scratch almost.
All right, that said, any more discussion on anything? All right, then, we do have an executive session to go into. Could I have a motion to go into executive
Madam
session?
Chair, I'll move that we go into executive session under Utah Code 524-205-1A, discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, and we are meeting right behind us in the council chambers.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we go into executive session for, under Utah Code 52-4-2051A, discussion of the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll meet in the chambers behind us here.
Hey, Amy.